Merry Monday, BoobTube. I'm back for the fourth day in a row, I believe. Maybe fifth. I don't know. I haven't been keeping track. Let's get right into it. A couple books to start off. First one, The Storm Runner. What drew me to this book was initially the cover. Looked kind of neat, but then I also saw at the top here it says Rick Riordan Presents. So, as you may know, I like the Rick Riordan books because I took some Greek mythology classes in university and really loved it. Was basically story time, you know, and all the Greek gods and the ridiculous things they got up to. It seemed like it would have been a lot of fun to have been a Greek god, but it was also a fun way to spend a class, and one I did really well in because I actually was quite interested in it. So Rick Riordan takes these Greek mythological characters from Greek gods and stuff like that, and puts them and these demigods, these half human, half god offspring of all these gods, and puts them in these modern day settings and scenarios. But it's basically like all the old magic is alive, but in modern times, and it's always really funny and stuff like that. So this Rick Riordan Presents series is, I guess, he's promoting authors that write about the same sort of stuff, mythological things, and they're from, I guess, this author here, J.C. Cervantes. I think she is, where is she from? I think she's got, yeah, a Mayan background or something like that. And so he's bringing these stories to light from authors that are from more I guess minority backgrounds, I guess, or something like that, but bringing these stories that you may not otherwise be exposed to kind of the mainstream, I guess. So which is pretty cool. So this story is about a young man named Zane Obispo who lives, there's really weird names in all this stuff I've been doing lately. He lives in New Mexico with his mom and his uncle Hondo, and he is homeschooled, and his life is pretty sweet because being homeschooled, he gets to be home around his family all the time. He's recently rescued a three-legged dog named Rosie, who he loves to death, and best of all, he has a volcano, his very own volcano in his backyard, which him and Rosie explore the crap out of. So the ball kind of drops on him, though, when his mom informs him that he has earned a scholarship to go to a private school, and which is a big opportunity. But the reason Zane doesn't want to go to school is that he walks with a cane. He was born with one leg shorter than the other one, and it's a condition that's never righted itself over all the years, and he's embarrassed by it and stuff like that, so he doesn't want to go to a school with all the other kids. So the next morning, or sorry, that night, he can't sleep, so him and Rosie go for a midnight stroll out to the volcano, and while they're out there, they see this small plane crash into the volcano, and as it's going down, Zane swears he sees this bizarre alien-like creature piloting the plane. After the police arrive and question him on what happened, he kind of goes back to bed and thinks, oh, it's just my overactive imagination, you know, coming up with this alien thing. So the next day he goes to school, and he's sent to the office right away because he stands up to the first kid that bullies him and actually whacks him with his cane. And so he ends up in the principal's office, and while he's there, this stunning girl named Brooks sits down beside him and is actually talking to him and stuff, and he's like, what? Like, you're talking to me? And he is amazed by the conversation, but he also wants it to kind of end because he wants her to go away so that she doesn't see that he walks with a cane and all of his embarrassment about that and stuff. So she says she'll see him later, which he's, again, dumbfounded by, and by later it means she shows up on his doorstep of his home later that night, and they go for a walk to the volcano. And on the way there, she starts to lay out this crazy scenario that she's actually a shapeshifter. She can turn into, I think it's a hawk or an eagle or something like that, and that the Mayan gods are actually all still alive and active, and there's a big thing going on right now, actually, which she is trying to help with. So it's rumored that Zane himself will be the one to free from prison the god of the Mayan god of death, destruction, and whatever, something else, Pooch. So he's like, well, why would I do that? And first of all, I'm not some sort of special destined person. I can't even walk properly. So she kind of goes on and tries to convince him, and then she explains to him that she needs to find the talisman or object that Apuch is imprisoned inside of, so she can take it far away from Zane, as the prophecy states that, again, he's going to be the one to set Apuch free and let that madman loose. So in the process of looking for this artifact inside the volcano, these demon runner creatures, which are the ones that he saw crash in the plane, show up, and they have to fight them off, and Brooks is actually fatally injured. So Zane, doing something that he thought he shouldn't and wouldn't do, he actually makes a deal with Apuch to free him from this this artifact in exchange for Brooks's life. So he ends up actually freeing Apuch to save Brooks, so it all comes to pass, the prophecy. So then from then on, they kind of come up with a plan to go after Apuch and put him back in his imprisonment. And to do that, they want to go visit the Hero Twins, which are the only two people in all of history that were strong enough to imprison Apuch. So they want to get some details from them on how just so that they managed that. So so from that point onwards, Zane's mom knows about his condition, because she obviously married and had a child with a full god and had this son, but she doesn't really know about him being prophesied to release Apuch, so they kind of push her off to the side and distract her with other stuff, while Uncle Hondo was brought in on the whole matter, and the three of them set off to find the Hero Twins. And along the way, they run into a couple of allies, many enemies, of course, and it's just this rollicking adventure as Zane navigates this newfound knowledge that he is you know, kind of a child of destiny in the new magical world that has sprung up all around him, which is also a very dangerous world, of course. Good book. Can't wait for the next one. Next up, and I was so excited when I started reading this book, because when I bought it, I didn't really realize what exactly it was. It is called Batman Arkham Knight, The Riddler's Gambit. So this book actually links the events of the Batman Arkham City game, which I just talked about a couple videos ago maybe, where Arkham City is run by Hugo Strange, and Joker's got the blood condition, and in the end Hugo Strange ended up being destroyed. Joker ended up dying from his condition, and so as this story opens up, the landscape for Gotham City crime has changed dramatically with Joker being dead. For a number of months, there has been very little crime from the big boys, and so all of these news outlets are reporting, like, was it great that Batman hasn't been spotted in a while, because look how peaceful things are when he's not causing all this destruction by battling all these maniacs and stuff like that. So there's all the opinions kind of split on Batman and whether he's a good vigilante or a bad vigilante. So soon enough, though, Commissioner Gordon calls Batman and says, something just arrived at the station, you got to come see this. So it's a piece of mail that is addressed to the Joker. Joker being dead, they think, oh god, is this one last gambit by him that was put into place once he died, or what is going on here? So Batman scans it, determines there's no poison or explosive or whatever, and inside the mail, package of mail, is just a USB drive. So Batman takes it to the Batcave to go to work on his advanced computers, and it's kind of a mystery. So it's an app that has a timer, a running timer on it, and then some really obscure corrupted photos that they can't make out. So bringing Oracle in on the subject, Batman, Oracle, and Alfred kind of mull things over, and eventually they kind of work out that one of these pictures is a picture of the old steel mill. So Batman sends Robin to investigate the steel mill, while him and Alfred and Oracle continue to go over things, and Batman hits the streets to see what he can kind of find topside. It ends up being the Riddler who's concocted this big scheme that will hopefully lead Batman and Robin to ruin. So Robin goes to the steel mill, and within it he finds this room where there's a giant chessboard with some goons that act as some of the pieces, and he has to make moves to get to these different rooms. And once he enters a room, there's a big puzzle inside that needs to be solved, one that if he doesn't solve in time, of course, is going to kill him. Now, these puzzles have been organized so that Batman and Robin have to work in tandem and be in communication with each other and help each other out as they go along. So as Robin's navigating all these different rooms and the pitfalls within them, and Batman's helping him, he, topside, runs into a handful of villains that Riddler's brought in on his scheme, including Killer Croc, Dr. Freeze, Mad Hatter's in there. Who was the other one? Harley Quinn and Deadshot. So all of them are involved somehow, and the journey takes them to, you know, some famous Gotham landmarks like the bank, the casino, Ace Chemicals, of course, and eventually each challenge gets a little bit harder, but they know those individual challenges at the start are just setting up the final challenge, so they fully expect if they work hard enough they will survive, but it's that last final challenge that's going to be the one that's going to be the hardest, the one where Riddler is going to, they assume, want to level the boom and hopefully, in his hopes or his mind, destroy Batman and Robin. So they just have to go and in communication with Gordon and other stuff, kind of navigate all these pitfalls and get through Riddler's challenges as he tries to establish himself as kind of the new king of crime in Gotham City, filling the void that the Joker left upon his death. So it was really cool tie-in because all the stuff they talked about in it, like the Guardians of Wonder City and Wonder City itself, and all the characters that came up in that adventure that eventually died, like Joker, Ra's al Ghul, and stuff like that. It was like I knew exactly what they were talking about because I just so recently finished that game. So it was just like continuing the adventure just in a different kind of format, right? So excellent book. Next up, a few movies to finish things off. We finally got around to watching John Wick 2. This picks up pretty much right after the opening John Wick movie, and he's still pissed off and he wants to get his car back. So his car is now in the possession of Abram Tarasov, who is the brother, I believe, of Viggo, who John Wick took out in the first movie, along with Viggo's son, who started the whole thing by stealing his car and killing his dog and all that. So John Wick invades Abram's head office of crime, I guess, and starts taking out all of his guys. And in the process of all the carnage, his car virtually ends up getting almost totaled anyways. And eventually, after a lot of fighting, he kind of gets fed up. He goes up to the office and extends a peace offering to Abram before he leaves with his car. And when he gets home, he packs up all of his clothes, all of his weapons, puts them in the cache in the basement, and then glosses it all over with a fresh coat of cement. Not long afterwards, the doorbell rings at his house, and it's a guy named Santino D'Antonio who is asking for a favor. And the reason he's asking for a favor is that he holds a marker with a fingerprint in John Wick's own blood that Santonio obtained by doing John a great favor a long time ago, which was to help him get out of the whole assassin business so that he could live a normal life with his wife Helen, who we all know passed away before the events of the first movie. So John outright denies him without even hearing what he wants, saying, "I've retired, I don't want any more of this garbage, so shove off." Santonio's pissed, but he seems like, okay, we'll leave. And then before they actually leave in their cars and take off, he blows up John's house with a rocket launcher. So he has sparked John's ire. But before John does anything, he goes to visit Winston, who is the manager of the Continental Hotel, which is basically safe ground for all of, you know, the criminal activity people of the city. No violence can be perpetrated on its grounds. He asked Winston what he should have done, and Winston was like, well, you didn't even hear what he wanted? Like, he's got a marker. You have to do something. So he's like, just do whatever he asks, and then afterward, once the marker's fulfilled, you can kill him in revenge. So John's like, okay. So he goes to visit Santonio, finds out what he wants. Santonio wants John to off Santonio's sister Gianna, who currently holds a seat at the High Council, which is the 12 most influential crime lords. I don't know if it's in the city or the world or whatever, but it's a very esteemed station to be at in terms of the crime world. And he wants it instead of his sister Gianna. So Gianna's actually holding an event in Rome. John goes there, kills her, but before he can get out, one of Gianna's guards, Cassian, who John knows from past stuff, recognizes him, and, well, let's just say it's on. As you know, in the John Wick movie, a long extended sequence of carnage and chaos and deliciousness ensues. So they eventually in their fight, they break through the window of the Rome's Continental Hotel, so they have to halt their fight and break it off. And then afterwards, John flies home to New York. But while he's heading home, Santonio, assuming that John's probably going to come for him, offers a $7 million bounty on John Wick's head to anybody who can bring him in. So John gets off the plane in New York City, and all of a sudden people are eyeing him suspiciously, and then they start to try to kill him. And he's already injured, so he's just running for his life, and eventually goes to a guy named the Bowery. I don't even know what it means, but the Bowery King, who he's had an experience with in the past, and informs this guy of Santonio now has the high seat at the council. He's a loose cannon, and he's gonna lay down the boom on all the criminal organizations in this city. So you help me, I'll get rid of him. You won't have to worry about it. So it's kind of a deal, whereas they would have just killed John for the bounty. They're looking long game more in this situation. So they help John and arm him and stuffs, and transport him underground in the sewers to the New York Museum, where Santonio has an exhibit opening up soon. And so that's where kind of the final fight takes place, is in a really cool exhibit that makes the final fight way better than it would have been normally. So again, just like the first John Wick movie, high body count, lots of action. Keanu Reeves not really saying much, being kind of mysterious and sullen. It's fantastic. It's every bit as good as the first movie. With I don't want to, if you haven't seen it, the ending of it is like almost Empire Strikes Back kind of cliffhanger. So I know Parabellum is been out for quite a while now, so I do want to pick up John Wick 3 and see exactly how he gets out of this next predicament, because I'm sure it's going to be just as awesome as the first two. So next up, one of the best comedies of all time, finally let James watch, Tommy Boy. The comedy team of Chris Farley and David Spade are fantastic. It's too bad that Chris Farley's gone. I still remember when he died, and it's that was one of the ones that, you know, kind of ruined my day, that's for sure. But at least we have all those years of Saturday Night Live and the movies that he did to kind of still witness the insanity that he was. He was just a big ball of energy. But in this movie, Chris Farley stars as Tom Callahan III. His dad, Big Tom Callahan Jr., owns a big auto parts manufacturing facility in Sandusky, Ohio, and he wants Tommy to eventually take over for him. Tommy's currently away at Marquette University, where he finally graduates, but just barely, and he's super pumped to return home. And when he does, his dad's got a couple surprises for him. First, he met a beautiful older woman named Beverly at a fat farm he went to, and they are soon getting married. His other surprise is that Tommy has his own office at Callahan now, and will be involved in everything day to day there. So Tommy's life has changed all of a sudden, and he's super pumped about it. And he's also very pumped that Beverly has a son named Paul, who will now be Tommy's brother. So he's just welcoming all this change, and he's just a positive dude, if somewhat dumb. And a bit bitter about this whole thing is a guy named Richard, who is played by David Spade, who works at Callahan, is basically Big Tom's kind of right-hand nerd, but he's very bitter and dry and sarcastic, and he resents Tommy for being Big Tom's son and just getting everything handed to him, even though he's a big stupid oaf, right? So at the wedding, during some singing that both of the Toms are doing afterwards, Big Tom ends up having a heart attack and dies. So Tommy's like despondent, of course, and is explaining everything to a girl he went to high school with named Michelle, who works at Callahan, and they've started hanging out and spending some time together. And eventually some inspiration comes during the next board meeting that him and Richard could hit the road and do all the sales calls that his dad used to do, because the bank is threatening to not go through on a loan for a recent addition Big Tom had made to the plant, their new brake pad division, which cost a lot of money. So Tommy's like, you can have our house as collateral and everything, just let me and Richard go out and do these sales calls, and we'll get all these big brake pads going and save the company, because we don't want this company to go under. There's so many people in this town employed here, and it's a big family business that we want to keep going for as long as possible. Richard's like, oh no. And Tommy's like, oh yes. So they hit the road, and this is where things get crazy. It's just slapstick, goofy, ridiculous humor, and of course everything starts terribly, but the two grow to respect and love one another, and they find their groove, and all of a sudden they start selling stuff. But little do we know is that Beverly and Paul are actually con artists, and they are actually a couple. So they were banking on Big Tom eventually croaking and them getting the money from the company and all that stuff, but he went ahead and accelerated their plan by croaking at the wedding, which has left them in a really good position. They plan on selling the company to Ray Zielinski, who is a big monster company in terms of automotive parts, after a bit of sabotage by Paul reverses all the work that Tommy and Richard do on the road. So it's kind of the last part of it is Richard and Tommy flying to Chicago to meet with Ray Zielinski after Tommy comes up with a plan. And of course, it's more hilarity, and they end up, well, I'm not going to tell you what happens, but you know, they save the company. Of course they do. So probably the best of all the Chris Farley movies. Tommy Boy is so iconic, and that pairing of him and David Spade is just, it works in so many ways. So that's a movie that I've watched so many times over the years. Last up, another dynamic duo. I wish they'd do more movies because they're both still alive. Talladega Nights, starring Will Ferrell and John Reilly. John C. Reilly, sorry, I always forget the C. But, oh yeah, and Leslie Bibb, that's her name, who's Will Ferrell's wife in the movie. She's super hot. But anyways, Will Ferrell plays Ricky Bobby, who, as a young kid, his father basically, he was an amateur stock car driver, and he left Ricky and his mom Lucy high and dry, and only showed up once in the last 10 years when he was in public school, and he showed up for career day. And the parting words he left before he got kicked out of the school for some behavior, let's say, is, if you're not first, you're last. So Ricky's always had this in his mind about going fast and winning, and that's all there is in life. And so years later, he's working with Cal, who John C. Reilly plays, Cal Naughton Jr., his best friend. They're both working as members of the pit crew for the Laughing Clown malt liquor team in the NASCAR circuit, who is a laughing stock themselves. They are a bad team with a bad driver. But during one race, the regular driver, gets out of the car and he's like, we're not going to win anyway. I'm going to go get a hot dog and take a leak. So then the crew chief, who's played by Michael Clark Duncan, is like, who wants to go fast? So Ricky Bobby suits up, gets in that car, and puts in a hell of a showing. And so he gets signed as the new driver, and years later it warps ahead, and he has accelerated his career through the NASCAR circuit, and now races for the Wonder Bread team, and has all sorts of resources at his disposal. And they even add a second driver, letting Cal Naughton Jr., his best friend, be his teammate as well. So the two form up a dynamic duo on the track, with Cal always letting Ricky win, and Cal usually getting second place, and they call themselves Shake and Bake. So eventually there's a number of things going on. Cal, without really realizing it, is becoming very resentful towards Ricky because he's never letting him win any races. It's always Ricky getting to win and getting all the glory. And soon enough, as they're celebrating at a roadhouse one night after a race, a strange fellow walks in. He's French. His name is Jean Girard, and he is a premier racer on the F1 circuit. And he announces that he has joined NASCAR and he is coming for Ricky Bobby. That's the last thing he needs to do is beat Ricky Bobby to make his career complete. And so a big fracas ensues, and Ricky gets his arm broken and can't race for a while. So but he seethes, and eventually he cuts his cast off and gets in a car at one of the races and goes after Jean Girard with gusto. And in the process, they end up having a big crash Jean Girard gets away okay, but Ricky rolls and rolls and rolls, and it's at Talladega, so it is the big one. And afterwards, he thinks he's on fire and he's running around, and the crash really affects him emotionally and psychologically, and he can't. He thinks he's done racing. He can't go fast. And so he ends up, Carly ends up leaving him for Cal Naughton Jr., who moves into Ricky's house. So Ricky takes his 2 kids, Walker and Texas Ranger, and moves in with his mom, Lucy. It's as he's living with his mom and delivering pizzas that he gets his life under control, starts managing his children properly, and eventually his father shows up and tries to help out and tries to get Ricky's edge back by doing a number of crazy stunts with his car. And so eventually it's Ricky's kind of resurgence to find his true self and get away from all the people that are you know sucking the goodness out of him, like his wife Carly and stuff like that. So that and of course apologize to Cal for all the second place finishes he forced him to take in the past, and start racing for himself and not for anybody else's expectations, not for his dad's you know, if you're not first you're last sort of mentality. He's racing because he loves it, and the only validation he needs is his own validation. So so it ends up in a big race between as Ricky gets back on the circuit finally, and he faces Jean Girard in the final race of the movie. So there's some other really good actors in it. Jane Lynch plays Ricky's mom, Lucy, and she's always great in everything she's in. And Amy Adams too is kind of the she works for NASCAR, and she becomes Ricky Bobby's kind of love interest after Carly gives him the shiest, and so she helps him kind of realize what he needs to do and stuff like that. So excellent movie. Just like Tommy Boy, it's a lot of goofy, slapstick, ridiculous humor. If you've seen Step Brothers, you'll know somewhat what Talladega Nights is like. Not quite as raunchy, but every bit as good. So and of course it's got race cars. It's a NASCAR movie. Like, it's fantastic. So that is the 5 things for this go round, and one more pile here, but it's not quite complete, so maybe a few more days before the last one here. But for now, you are up to date, and we will see you in the very near future.